I've got a bit of a beef with those terms that are so broad and they seem like they're on a Hallmark card or maybe they're a platitude. Maybe that's the same thing. One such example is self care. What is self care? And why should you care? Self care looks like a couple of things. It's the physical, tangible, obvious. For example, self care is hygiene discipline. Recently, single man living alone for the first time in 7 years buys Q-tips because he keeps on forgetting to. Look what I got. Look at that gold. Literally, it's a good haul. Don't worry, that's going in the trash. I left it out just for that moment. Hygiene is self-care. Not hitting snooze is self-care. Training your body, eating well, self-care. Getting around your friends, self-care. Making new friends, self-care. Journaling, working hard, spending time figuring out what it is that you want for you. Self-care. In a way, self-care and leveling up yourself, looking at yourself like a video game character and life is a video game, taking joy in the process of seeing which attributes, which quests you want to go on. What do you need to level up or skill up in order to have the best odds of achieving a particular quest? That's self-care. I emphasize joy there in that process because if you are too strict or too hard on yourself, then that's not self-care. That's not being nice to yourself. There's a balance between joy and a focus on joy in the process and a focus on the process and aiming for a particular result. Results are important, but they are not everything. You will have better results, at least more sustainable results, or results that you can enjoy if you are having joy in the process, if you have correctly aligned self-care. We could play a game here. Take a drink, a non-alcoholic drink. Every time Michael mentions self-care. So self-care is internal dialogue as well. Internal dialogue, internal narrative. Goes back to our stories, our cognitions that we tell ourselves. I am worthy, I am not worthy. I am smart, I am not smart. I'm safe, I am not safe. I can trust myself, I cannot trust myself. Processes that lead you to a positive cognition. That's self-care. Self-care is anything that reminds you who the fuck you are. Because if you are not constantly reminding yourself who you are, then the world is going to impress upon you who it wants you to be to suit its needs. A complementary way of thinking about this is that if you are not living and going after your own agenda, you are living in and going after somebody else's agenda. So one of the highest forms, perhaps the highest form of self-care, is figuring out what your agenda is and establishing, iterating on, and adhering to a process that empowers you to do just that. Ideally, this process acts as both a focusing laser for your energy and your actions, but also as a shield that keeps that world's agenda from penetrating and getting into your sphere. For me, the two things, well, there's really three. The three things that remind me who I am are pursuits of strength and song. And then the third thing oftentimes comes with those, and that is getting around other people. And so just like being very careful and conscious of your internal dialogue is critical to self-care, being very careful with who you spend your time with and the energy that you give away matters a lot. While it's very important to remember who you are and to undergo activities that constantly refresh that, because we have to be reminded and we have to refresh ourselves in that every single day. It's also important to be around people who make you feel like anything is possible and who give you perspective into who you could be. People who make you feel like anything is possible, see you as the highest version of yourself. And while much of self-care has to do with establishing a state of becoming self-validating, you cannot do life alone for a variety of reasons. Loneliness is a cause of death, early death for a lot of people, and it lowers the quality of life that they do have. And so pursuing activities that remind you who you are is great, but if you have nobody to share that with, and if you have nobody to expose you to what might be possible to expand your perspective, then your cup is only half full. And your cup can only ever be half full. As important as spirituality and a relationship with and a pursuit of knowing God is, oftentimes it's other people who expand that for you. As important as it is to know what your agenda is and where you're going, the perspective of the right people expand that field of vision of what's possible and thus allow you to sharpen your agenda, focus your energies more in alignment with pursuit of your highest self. So self-care is really important. I think we've established that. Why don't we have self-care? I think I owe us about 55 drinks, but I'm going to take one. We don't have self-care because self-care is scary. And this is a world where you're not allowed to be scared, and you're not allowed to admit that you don't have the answers. And we get wrapped up in this cycle of thinking that the harder and harsher and the meaner that we are to ourselves, the more virtue we have. Let me read you a passage. Excuse me while I switch books. This is from The Eye of the I. It's the sequel to Power versus Force. So on that note of thinking that there is virtue in the harder that we are being on ourselves, said more simplistically, the meaner that you are to yourself, the better of a person you are. Guilt is an attempt to purchase salvation, manipulate God, and purchase forgiveness by suffering. These attitudes stem from the misinterpretation of God as a great punisher. We think we will assuage his righteous wrath by our pain, suffering, and penance. There is actually only one appropriate penance for wrongdoing, and that is change. Instead of condemning the negative, we choose the positive. Along with giving up guilt, it is also very helpful to give up sin as a reality. Error is correctable. Sin is a mistake and is forgivable. Most of what people call sin is an attachment, and emotionally stemming from the child within. It is actually the child who lies, steals, cheats, calls other people names, and hits other people. Therefore, sin is really immaturity and ignorance of the true nature of reality and the nature of consciousness. As spiritual values replace worldly ones, temptation diminishes and error is less likely to occur. So, self-care is forgiving oneself while also letting go of the internal dialogues around guilt and shame. I should be working harder. I should have known better. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. And while we're talking about forgiveness being for ourselves in this instance, the notion evokes forgiving somebody else for some trespass against us. Man, look at that. I refuse to take finasteride or put some spray on there. If it goes, it goes. Got enough pictures documenting it in all of its long and full, luscious glory. Those of you who might be listening to this, I'm referring to my hair. Anyway, whether it is towards yourself or it is towards another person, forgiveness does not mean you forget. Forgiveness is for you, because just like loneliness is not conducive to a high quality of life, to neither a high quality of life nor a long lifespan, lack of forgiveness has the same effects. It causes stress. It holds on to these negative internal dialogues and these negative perspectives, which over time build up and compound and become harder and harder to let go of. So whether it is forgiving yourself or it is forgiving somebody else, it's necessary to change, which, as Dr. Hawkins evidenced, changes all we're being asked to do. So in this case, we're being asked to go from not having any self-care to having self-care, not hitting snooze, or from hitting snooze to not hitting snooze, from ripping your Q-tips, or from not ripping your Q-tips to ripping your Q-tips, from isolating in your apartment to going and getting around other people, from sedating to consciously remembering who you are. And I gotta tell you, having come from a lifelong place of zero self-care in every single one of these ways, whether it is from a total lack of self-discipline and self-leadership, which looks like hitting snooze, dressing poorly, not taking care of basic hygiene. And that doesn't mean not showering and stinking. It means, the first thing that comes to my mind, not putting forth an effort to present yourself as best as you possibly could every single day to the world. And now, so that doesn't become vanity for vanity's sake, that would be validation outside of self-driven. That is being responsible for the energy that you bring to the world. That is, I look and appear my best because that helps me to show up as my best, because it's just another way of remembering who I am. And that feels good. When I do these things, I feel good. I feel like my best self. That raises your vibration. A lot of my perspective and lens on this is really influenced by everything that Dr. Hawkins writes. And to use those examples a bit more, guilt is a very low vibrating frequency. But love is a much higher vibrating frequency. Gratitude is even higher. And to go from 600 to 601 is an order of magnitude. So to go from 600 to 700, where gratitude is, several orders of magnitude. It's almost unfathomably large jump in vibration. And what's in it for us when we start implementing self-care? Great, we look better, we feel better, and we start doing it for ourselves, so we become more self-validating. Becoming self-validating removes neediness, which is a major cause of angst. Why won't this person text me back? I would be happy if only I could get attention from this person, or if only this would happen, and then I would feel good about myself. My time in sales was very informative in how I think and view the world. And that is having commission breath, desperation. Not having self-care makes you reek of desperation. So the hygiene that we're most concerned with in self-care is getting rid of that stench. Saying stench that way reminds me of Agent Smith in the first Matrix, with Morpheus all locked up in the chair. Self-care requires a lot of courage. if you want to play to win. And it's boring. Life is boring. Games are boring if you don't play to win. Play to win, but also play at the speed of fun. And the speed of fun is really about the attitude that you take to the process. Your actions are faster than your critic, and they are louder than your worry. And you are given permission to fail, to fall flat on your face. And when your internal dialogue is calibrated correctly, that doesn't mean, oh, I suck, I should never try this again. I am worthless, I am terrible, I should go live in a hole. I'm taking up other people's time and I'm wasting it. It's, oh, I sucked. Let me just sit with sucking. Let me try it again. Because it's fun to try. Excellence is fun. And that's where you bridge that need to have results, or the importance of a result, but also the joy of the process. You want to have a really high standard even in the process. But it's okay to come up short to that standard. It's also okay to make the same mistake twice. Just don't make it for the same reason. So broadly, zoomed out from the highest level, self-care is establishing routines, processes, habits, mindsets, behaviors that constantly remind you who you are, while simultaneously letting you know that it is okay to fail and that you are not defined by your results, that you are defined by your willingness to get back up and to try again, and by the integrity that you bring to the game. One more time for the folks in the back. Self-care.